I never planned for any of this to happen. If someone had told me a year ago that a single piece of delicate lace would start a chain of events that would rewrite everything I believed about myself, I would have laughed and walked away. Back then I thought I knew who I was. I kept my head down, wore the same dull clothes every day, and avoided anything that might draw attention. My life was a quiet routine, a series of predictable steps that felt safe even though they left me feeling invisible. But all of that began to shift the day I met Clara. She wasn't the kind of person you forget. Her presence filled every room like sunlight sneaking through a cracked window. She worked at the small art supply shop near the bus station, a place I only visited to grab sketchbooks for my sister. I remember the first time she smiled at me. Warm, knowing, almost as if she could already see the part of me I kept hidden even from myself. At first our conversations were small and harmless. She would ask about my drawings even though I never showed her any, and I would mumble something about school projects. But each visit stretched a little longer than the last. There was a pull in the way she looked at me, a quiet invitation to be more than the shadow I had become. One rainy afternoon, when the shop was nearly empty, Clara reached behind the counter and placed a small, neatly wrapped package in front of me. "For you," she said, her eyes sparkling with a secret I couldn't decode. My heart stumbled as I asked what it was. "Just something I think you might like. No pressure." The package was soft to the touch, light but carefully folded. I wanted to refuse it, to insist I didn't need anything, but the curiosity in her gaze made it impossible. I took it home without opening it until midnight, when the house was silent and the world outside my window felt distant. Sitting on my bed, I unwrapped the paper and found a piece of lace, delicate, white, and impossibly beautiful. It was a scarf or maybe part of something else I couldn't tell. The pattern swirled like frozen smoke, intricate and alive. My fingers trembled as I traced the edges, a warmth blooming in my chest that I couldn't name. I told myself it was just fabric, just a gift from a kind stranger, but something about it felt different. Dangerous, even. I slipped it around my neck almost without thinking. The lace was cool at first, then slowly warmed to my skin as if it belonged there. In the mirror, the person staring back at me didn't look entirely like the boy I saw every morning. There was a softness, a quiet glow that made my breath catch. For a moment I imagined a life where I could wear something like this without fear, where the lines between who I was and who I could be weren't so sharp. I tore the scarf off before I could fall any deeper, shoving it under my pillow as though hiding it would erase the feelings stirring inside me. But sleep never came that night. The lace haunted me with every blink, whispering questions I wasn't ready to answer. The next morning I woke up with the lace still on my mind, as if it had seeped into my dreams and settled there. I tried to focus on the usual routine: coffee, brushing my hair, the long walk to the bus, but every sound seemed muffled compared to the silent pull of that delicate fabric hidden beneath my pillow. At school I caught myself glancing at reflections in windows, wondering if anyone could somehow see the secret I carried. Of course they couldn't. To everyone else I was the same quiet figure I had always been, blending into the hallway crowds. But inside, something was beginning to shift, a restless flutter that made every ordinary moment feel strangely unreal. That afternoon I found myself walking toward the art shop again without even deciding to go. Clara was there, leaning against the counter with a sketchbook in her hand, and when she noticed me the corners of her mouth lifted in that soft, knowing smile. "Did you open it?" she asked before I could even say hello. I froze, the weight of the lace pressing against my memory. I nodded and managed a small yes. Her eyes sparkled with something between mischief and understanding. And I wanted to tell her it was beautiful, that it made me feel something I didn't have words for, but all I could manage was, "It's nice." Clara tilted her head, reading the truth I couldn't speak. "Good," she said quietly. "Sometimes the smallest things can show us who we really are." Her words lingered in the air like a gentle challenge. Over the next few days I visited the shop more often, pretending to browse but secretly searching for a reason to talk to her. Each conversation peeled away another layer of the wall I had built around myself. She asked questions that no one else ever thought to ask, about my favorite colors, the music that made me feel alive, the dreams I never said out loud. Somehow she made it safe to answer. One evening, just as the shop was closing, Clara reached under the counter again. This time she pulled out a small box wrapped in deep blue paper. "For when you're ready," she said. My heart skipped. "Ready for what?" I asked, but she only smiled and placed the box in my hands. At home I paced for nearly an hour before opening it. Inside was a folded piece of black lace, softer and finer than the first, along with a note written in Clara's delicate handwriting. "Wear this when you want to see yourself clearly." The message sent a shiver through me. I turned the lace over in my hands, its intricate patterns catching the dim light of my bedroom. It was more than just fabric. It felt like an invitation, a quiet dare to step beyond the borders I had always obeyed. That night I closed the door, locked it, and slowly draped the lace around my shoulders. The transformation wasn't dramatic. There was no flash of light or sudden revelation. But as I looked into the mirror, I saw a softness that hadn't been there before, a quiet elegance that made my chest tighten. I didn't look like someone pretending. I looked like someone discovering a piece of themselves that had been waiting all along. My reflection didn't frighten me. It comforted me, like meeting a long-lost friend. I touched the glass as if I could reach through it and pull that version of me into the world. But then the fear crept in. What if someone found out? What if they laughed, or worse? I tore the lace away, hiding it beneath my clothes drawer, and sat on the floor shaking. Sleep was impossible. Every sound in the house felt amplified. The creak of the walls, the whisper of the wind outside. As if the world itself was waiting for me to decide who I was. I couldn't stop imagining the look in Clara's eyes when she gave me the box. The way she seemed to know a truth I was only beginning to understand. Part of me wanted to return everything, to shut the door on whatever this was. But another part, louder and braver, wanted to step through that door completely. The next morning I woke with a nervous energy that made the air feel sharper, as if every sound carried a hidden message. I carried the secret of the black lace like a heartbeat under my clothes. At school the usual chatter felt far away, as though I were watching life from behind a thin veil. My mind kept returning to Clara. Her quiet confidence, the way she offered these gifts without a single word of pressure, as if she knew I would find my own answers if I simply followed the thread she'd placed in my hands. That evening I went back to the shop, the bell above the door ringing like a quiet confession. Clara looked up from a stack of brushes and her eyes softened when she saw me. "You wore it, didn't you?" she asked gently. I hesitated but finally nodded. It felt different, like I was seeing myself for the first time. My voice cracked on the last words. Clara smiled in a way that felt like sunlight breaking through a storm. "That's exactly what I hoped you'd feel. There's nothing wrong with exploring who you are. Sometimes clothing isn't just clothing, it's language. It speaks before we find the courage to." I wanted to ask her why she was helping me, why she cared so much about a stranger who barely knew how to say hello, but before I could speak she motioned toward a back room I'd never noticed before. "Come with me," she said softly. My feet moved before my doubts could stop them. The room behind the shop was warm and filled with soft light. Racks of fabric lined the walls. Silks, satins, lace in every color of dusk and dawn. It felt like stepping into another world, one where possibilities shimmered in every corner. Clara closed the door behind us and turned to me. "I keep this space for people who need a little privacy," she said. "A place to try on what they can't out there." She gestured toward the racks. "You don't have to do anything. You can just look. But if something speaks to you, listen." My heart raced as I scanned the fabrics. My eyes landed on a pale lavender blouse, its sheer sleeves embroidered with tiny silver threads. Called to me like a quiet melody. Clara noticed my gaze and simply nodded. "Would you like to try it?" My throat felt dry but I whispered, "Yes." She handed it to me with the same calm care she had shown with the lace. "The mirror is over there. Take your time." I stepped behind a curtain, my hands trembling as I slipped out of my sweater. The lavender fabric was cool and impossibly soft, sliding over my skin like a breath of air. When I fastened the last button and turned toward the mirror, my chest tightened. The person staring back at me looked right. Not disguised, not pretending. Just me, but clearer, as if the reflection had finally caught up to the truth inside. A sudden wave of emotion hit me so hard I had to grab the edge of the table. Tears welled in my eyes before I could stop them. Clara's voice floated gently through the curtain. "How does it feel?" I swallowed hard. Like I've been holding my breath for years and finally let it out. When I stepped out, Clara's face lit up with a warmth that felt like acceptance itself. "Beautiful," she said simply. And for the first time I believed the word might actually belong to me. But even in that quiet moment of discovery, fear crept in like a shadow. What would people say? What would my family think? The thought of facing them dressed like this made my stomach twist. Clara seemed to read my mind. "You don't have to tell anyone," she said softly. "This is yours. No one can take it from you. What you do with it is entirely up to you." I nodded, though the storm inside me only grew stronger. I wanted to stay in that warm back room forever, wrapped in lavender and lace, safe from the harshness of the outside world. But I also knew I couldn't hide here forever. Clara gently touched my shoulder. "The hardest part isn't putting on the clothes," she said. "It's believing you have the right to feel this way. But you do." Her words sank into me like seeds, planting something fragile and unstoppable. As I changed back into my old clothes, I felt the weight of the world pressing down, but beneath it a small, defiant flame burned brighter than ever. That night, lying awake in my dark room, I clutched the lavender blouse I had secretly purchased with trembling hands. I knew this wasn't just about clothes anymore. It was about every unspoken dream I had buried under layers of fear. The lace, the blouse, Clara's quiet encouragement, they were all pieces of a puzzle that was slowly revealing the person I had always been. And though the road ahead terrified me, I couldn't ignore the truth any longer. Something inside me had awakened, and there was no turning back. Days turned into weeks, and every moment felt like a silent tug of war between the life I had always known and the one that was quietly unfolding inside me. At school and at home I kept up my familiar routine, but the secret of the lavender blouse and the black lace pulsed beneath everything like a hidden heartbeat. I began to notice how dull my usual clothes felt against my skin, how heavy my voice sounded when I forced it into the old patterns of conversation. Every mirror became a question I couldn't answer, every reflection a quiet reminder of the person waiting behind the mask. Clara's shop became my sanctuary. After classes I would wander in under the pretense of buying pencils or paper, but we both knew I was there for something deeper. Sometimes we talked for hours about art and music, but often we simply sat in comfortable silence while I traced the edges of fabrics with my fingertips. Clara never pushed, never demanded, but each visit seemed to loosen a knot inside me. One chilly evening I arrived at the shop to find the front door locked. For a moment panic shot through me, but then I noticed a small note taped to the glass. "Back room. Door is open." My heart raced as I pushed inside. Soft music floated through the air as I stepped into the familiar hidden space. Clara stood near the racks, a garment bag draped over her arm. When she saw me, her eyes lit with that quiet warmth I had come to depend on. "I was hoping you'd come tonight," she said, holding out the garment bag. "I found something that made me think of you. You don't have to take it, but I'd like you to see it." I took the bag with shaking hands. Inside was a dress, simple but breathtaking. It was a gentle shade of moonlight gray with delicate lace tracing the sleeves and neckline, neither loud nor timid, but perfectly balanced between softness and strength. My breath caught. I can't," I whispered. The thought of wearing it felt too bold, too impossible. Clara stepped closer, her voice calm but firm. "You don't have to decide now. But you deserve to see yourself without fear. That's all this is. A chance to see." Her words settled into me like a steady heartbeat. Slowly, almost against my own will, I carried the dress behind the curtain. My fingers fumbled with the zipper as I slipped out of my clothes. The fabric slid over me like a whisper of courage. When I finally turned toward the mirror, my breath hitched. The reflection staring back was not a stranger. It was me. More real, more alive than I had ever allowed myself to be. The gray lace framed my shoulders like a promise, and the soft folds of the skirt caught the light in a way that made the room glow. I stood frozen, overwhelmed by a surge of emotions I couldn't name. Relief, joy, fear. All of them tangled into a single, undeniable truth. Clara's voice drifted through the curtain. "How do you feel?" I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat. Finally I managed. Like I've finally found the person I've been searching for. When I stepped out, Clara's eyes softened with quiet pride. "Exactly," she said. "You are allowed to be whoever you are. Clothes don't create you, they reveal you." The room felt charged, alive with possibility. But even in that shining moment, a shadow crept in. I thought of my family, of the friends who only knew the careful version of me. How could I explain this? How could I make them understand something I had barely begun to understand myself? As if sensing my fear, Clara placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "You don't owe anyone an explanation," she said softly. "Your journey belongs to you. Take it at your own pace. The world can wait." Her words steadied me, but the fear didn't vanish. I left the shop that night with the dress carefully folded in a bag, my heart pounding as though I were carrying a fragile dream that might shatter if the wind blew too hard. At home I hid the dress beneath my bed, but its presence filled the room like a quiet flame. Each night I found myself drawn to it, my fingertips brushing the fabric, imagining the person I was becoming. And slowly, a plan began to form. I couldn't stay hidden forever. The thought terrified me, but the idea of burying this truth again was worse. One Friday evening, when I knew my parents would be out late, I locked my bedroom door and carefully slipped into the dress once more. This time I didn't stop at the mirror. I opened the window and let the cool night air sweep across my face. For the first time I felt the world outside not as a threat, but as a place I might someday belong to as myself. The street below was quiet, the moonlight soft against the rooftops. I whispered to the night, to the version of me that had waited so long in silence. "I see you." And in that whisper I felt something unbreakable take root. The following week unfolded like a series of quiet tests. Every ordinary task, walking to school, greeting my parents, sitting through class, felt heavier, as if the gray lace dress hidden beneath my bed added a secret weight to my every movement. I caught myself imagining what it would feel like to walk down the street wearing it in the sunlight, to let the world see the person reflected in the shop's mirror. Each time the thought came, my heart raced with a mixture of excitement and dread. Clara remained the steady anchor in the middle of the storm. I visited the shop almost every day now, drawn to her calm presence and the quiet safety of the back room. We talked less about fabrics and more about life, about the courage it takes to exist as yourself in a world that loves boxes and labels. She listened without judgment, her eyes full of patience, never pushing me faster than I could go. One afternoon, as I traced my fingers along a row of soft scarves, she said, "You've been carrying this alone for a long time, haven't you?" The question cracked something inside me. My throat tightened, and for a long moment I couldn't speak. Finally I nodded. "I don't even know what to call it. I just feel more like me when I wear these things. But I'm terrified of what people will say." Clara leaned against the counter, her expression thoughtful. "Names will come when you're ready. What matters is that you feel alive. The rest is noise." Her words settled into me like a slow sunrise. For the first time, I considered that maybe I didn't need every answer before taking the next step. That night I couldn't sleep. The dress called to me from beneath the bed, whispering possibilities I was both desperate for and afraid of. I sat in the dark, staring at the outline of the garment bag, until a sudden impulse jolted me upright. Before fear could talk me out of it, I slipped into the dress and wrapped the black lace scarf around my shoulders. Standing before the mirror, I inhaled deeply. This time I didn't flinch. The reflection was familiar now, a quiet friend waiting patiently for my courage. A strange calm washed over me, stronger than the fear. I opened my bedroom door and stepped into the hallway. The house was silent except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. I walked slowly to the living room, each step echoing louder than it should have. I stood by the window, the moonlight spilling across the floor, and for the first time I didn't feel like an intruder in my own home. I belonged in this moment, in this body, in these clothes. My heart pounded, but I didn't retreat. Instead, I whispered into the stillness, "This is me." The sound of a car pulling into the driveway snapped me back to reality. My parents were home early. Panic shot through me like lightning. I darted down the hallway, nearly tripping on the hem of the dress, and locked my bedroom door just as the front door opened. My hands shook as I changed back into my usual clothes, shoving the dress into its hiding place. My heart thudded so loudly I was sure they could hear it through the walls. When my mother knocked to say good night, I forced my voice steady, answering with a casual, "I'm fine." But inside I felt anything but fine. The close call left me trembling, but beneath the fear a strange exhilaration burned bright. For a fleeting moment I had stepped outside the prison of my own hesitation, and it felt incredible. The next day I told Clara everything. She listened without a flicker of judgment, then smiled softly. "You were brave," she said. "Not because you wore a dress, but because you faced yourself. That's where courage lives." Her words stayed with me all week. I began to notice small changes in myself. How I carried my shoulders, how I met people's eyes. Even in my regular clothes, the world seemed sharper, more vibrant. It was as if the person I saw in the mirror had begun to walk beside me in every moment, whispering reminders of who I could be. But with this growing confidence came a new tension. I couldn't hide forever. Each day the secret felt heavier, pressing against my ribs like a heartbeat that demanded to be heard. I didn't know how my family would react. The fear of rejection loomed like a storm on the horizon, but the thought of living a lifetime behind a locked door frightened me even more. Clara sensed the shift before I even said a word. One evening she placed a gentle hand on my arm. "You don't have to tell them today," she said quietly. "But when you do, remember that the truth isn't something to be ashamed of. It's a gift, first to yourself and maybe one day to them." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Deep down I knew the moment was coming. The question wasn't if, it was when. And when it arrived, I would have to choose between the safety of silence and the freedom of being seen. That night, as I lay awake with a black lace draped across my pillow, I felt the pull of both fear and hope. The path ahead was uncertain, but the person waiting at the end of it felt real, alive, and worth every step. The days that followed felt like the slow rise of a storm. Every conversation with my family carried a hidden weight, every dinner a silent rehearsal of words I still didn't know how to speak. I went through my routines like a careful actor, but inside a quiet certainty was growing stronger, a steady rhythm I couldn't ignore. It was no longer a question of whether I would share my truth. It was only a question of when. One Saturday evening the opportunity came unexpectedly. My parents announced they were staying home for the night, settling into the living room with soft music and warm tea. Something in the calmness of the house gave me courage I hadn't planned on. My heart pounded as I walked to my room and closed the door. I stared at the garment bag beneath the bed, the gray lace dress waiting like an old friend. My hands trembled as I unzipped it, the soft fabric spilling into the light. I slipped into the dress slowly, savoring the familiar embrace of the fabric. The black lace scarf followed, its delicate weight settling across my shoulders like a promise. When I looked into the mirror, fear and strength collided in a single heartbeat. I didn't see a disguise. I saw myself, whole, undeniable, alive. With a deep breath, I opened my bedroom door and stepped into the hallway. The floor creaked beneath my feet, each sound magnified by the pounding in my chest. My parents looked up as I entered the living room. For a moment the room held its breath. My mother's eyes widened, my father's hand paused mid-sip of tea. No one spoke. The silence stretched until it felt like a living thing between us. I forced myself to meet their eyes. "This is me," I said softly. "I don't have all the answers yet. But this This feels right. My voice wavered, but I didn't look away. My mother was the first to move. She set down her cup and crossed the room, her expression unreadable. I braced for rejection, for the sharp sting of disappointment. Instead she reached out and touched the lace at my shoulder, her fingers trembling. "You look beautiful," she whispered. Her eyes shone with tears. "I wish you hadn't been so afraid to tell us." My knees nearly gave out. My father stood slowly, his face still serious, but when he spoke his voice was steady. "We love you," he said. "That doesn't change." Relief flooded through me so quickly I almost sobbed. The fear I had carried for so long melted into the warmth of their acceptance. We sat together for a long time, words coming slowly but honestly. I told them how the lace had started it all, how Clara had given me the courage to explore what I had kept buried. They listened, sometimes confused, sometimes quiet, but never turning away. Later that night, after they had gone to bed, I stepped outside onto the porch. The cool air wrapped around me, carrying the scent of rain. I looked up at the moon and thought of Clara, the first person to see me before I had seen myself. I made a silent promise to thank her for every moment of patience, every gift of understanding. The next day I went to the shop early. Clara looked up as the bell above the door chimed and smiled when she saw me. "You told them," she said, not as a question but as a certainty. I nodded, unable to hide my grin. "They accepted me." Her eyes sparkled with quiet pride. I knew they would. Sometimes we imagine the worst because we can't yet believe we deserve the best. I stepped forward and hugged her tightly. "Thank you," I whispered. "For the lace, for everything." She hugged me back, her voice soft. "You did the hard part. You chose to be yourself." As I left the shop, the sunlight felt different. Brighter, warmer, more real. The world hadn't changed, but I had. The lace scarf rested against my neck, a reminder of the journey that had begun with a simple gift and led me here, to a life no longer defined by fear. Walking home, I realized that transformation isn't a single moment. It's 1,000 small choices, each one a quiet step toward truth. Clara's gift of lace was only the beginning, but it had opened a door I would never again close. I was no longer hiding. I was simply me, whole, seen, and free.